Welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about influence to sales, KOL and KOC marketing in China. And could everyone just raise their hand to show that they can hear me and see the screen fine? Okay, I see a couple hands going up. If anyone has any technical difficulties during the webinar, please do send me a message and then I'll get to it at the, I'll be sure to respond and then make sure that the experience goes okay. So before we get started, a little bit about us. We are an independent brand management agency that develops, manages, and distributes brands across China and Southeast Asia. We're responsible for the growth, direction, and performance of some of the largest and most successful brands across a number of different categories. And we provide services such as research, branding, strategy, social media marketing, e-commerce, technical integration, and distribution. Here are some of our work so far. And here are a number of our past and current clients. And then our speaker today is going to be Ashwin Pillai, our commercial manager at Redfern Digital. So he has a deep and holistic understanding across both the China and Southeast Asian markets, having worked with brands across categories including food and beverage, alcohol, FMCG, mother and baby, and many others. So here is our agenda for today. We're going to start off by giving a brief introduction into who KOLs and KOCs are. We're going to talk about their activation and impact in China, why Chinese consumers trust them, the advantages and disadvantages to working with KOLs and KOCs, and then the different ways that you can work with them in terms of the types of collaborations, the types of formats that these collaborations take. And then we're also going to go into the top platforms, the top social media platforms in China through which brands can work with KOLs, and then the different tiers of KOLs in terms of follower base and the budget that is required to work with KOLs of different tiers. We're going to go into the framework of KOL marketing in China, the challenges of working with KOLs, and then the entire process from initial contact to report and analysis of the collaboration. And then we're going to talk a little bit about virtual KOLs, which Ashwin will explain what that is later, and then talk about the strategy for KOL and KOC marketing for specific platforms, and then going into practical suggestions and key takeaways. So at the end, we're also going to have a Q&A. If anyone has any questions throughout, please do share them through, and then we'll be sure to get to them at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ashwin and let him get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Sandra. Is my sound coming through okay?
Yes, I can hear you. And I've made you host, so you should be able to share your screen now as well.
Fantastic. Is that coming up clearly?
Yep, I can see that.
Excellent. Well, firstly, thank you everybody for joining today's webinar session. A bit of a different time to what we normally run with. So welcoming all our guests from around the world, North America, Europe. I can see a couple from Australia at this hour, so thank you very much for joining. Just a little bit of a recap on myself. So my name is Ash. I'm the commercial manager here at Redfern Digital. I work across many of our key accounts and clients across FMCG in terms of marketing, e-commerce, market entry, branding, etc. across the mainland China and wider Southeast Asian markets. Today's session, we're going to be focusing on the influence of sales. So looking at KOL and KOC marketing in China, which is obviously always a very hot and topical subject in the market. It's evolving very rapidly. We have quite a lot of content to get through today. So please do sit back and enjoy. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box, and we will go through a Q&A session towards the end. So let's get started. So key opinion leaders, what are they? They are your Chinese equivalent of an influencer. What is particularly interesting about influencers is that, you know, they're sort of the evolution of media, so to speak, in China. How China's gone from advertising in terms of celebrities, KOLs, live streaming to KOC. They're the apex of influencer and intention to purchase. You could say that they have become the evolution of how Chinese consumers have perceived trust in terms of media channels when it comes to promoting and incentivizing purchase, particularly for e-commerce. Nowadays, things have changed a lot. And you could say that it is now the era of the KOC. And that is largely due to the evolution of Chinese consumer trust, where KOCs are essentially a smaller KOL. They have a much smaller following than your typical larger KOL, but their followership is a lot more engaged. When it comes to branding and marketing, consumers are very much normalized by KOCs in the China market across core platforms such as Doyin, Xiaohongshu, etc., which we'll be touching on some of the platforms and their characteristics shortly. For a lot of the brands that we work with in the market, KOCs is often a key part of their strategy. They're very powerful in that brands don't need to put all of their eggs in one basket when it comes to investment on just one larger KOL. We'll recommend our clients to often spread the risk, particularly when it comes to new brands that are entering the market on media. KOCs provide a very strong opportunity to get an understanding of your core target consumer demographics. And over time, while analyzing and understanding the data of the different KOCs and the ROI and engagement that you're getting around your brand, you're using different KOCs, using that data and those insights over time to ultimately refine and develop your paid media strategy for China. So KOL activation, it's essentially delivering a KOL activation is all about consistency. This really should be supported by consistent brand messaging through your own social media channels. Many of our clients, when it comes to own media marketing, volume isn't what we will push. Creating noise and engaging a number of different KOLs or KOCs with a supportive own media strategy across consistent brand messaging, creative design, authentic content that is memorable and eye-catching is key. It's long gone are the days of 4 WeChat posts a month, albeit that works for some very large and developed brands and market, particularly for those who have a strong offline and on-trade presence. But good quality content and having a pulse on the market from a content marketing perspective is key, and ensuring that it's memorable, it's authentic, and Chinese consumers can actually resonate with your brand. You'll see from the data here, we're not actually seeing the KOL influencer market slow down. It's merely evolving. And when I say evolving, I mean evolving in the sense where it's becoming more intimate and trust-driven with consumers. Years ago, during the heydays of Weibo, when celebrities were the word on the street, so to speak, that is still a large proportion of paid media when it comes to China. But when it comes to driving consumer interest and engagement and actual interest and intent on purchasing, we're seeing KOCs become the way to go for a lot of brands, particularly with the rise of Doyin, where now we're seeing, which you'll see in market share splits over the coming slides, that the investment into KOL and KOC marketing into Doyin is massive. And that has also been bolstered by what we call the attention economy. So consumers that are now becoming a lot more driven by content that they're forced to see on the likes of platforms such as Doyin and Kuaishou. So the impact of KOLs on purchasing in China. So you can see a clear differentiation here of the importance of KOL marketing between the ages of 16 to 34. It's a very powerful tool, particularly for connecting with Gen Z. We've certainly seen quite an interesting transition of an innovation, particularly when it comes to local Chinese brands, particularly over COVID, innovation when it comes to NPD or branding or brand collaborations. Local Chinese brands have more or less been at the forefront of innovation, developing products that really clearly resonate with certain niches of Gen Z demographics, communities, and pockets of society within that younger generation. When you're looking at other platforms outside of Douyin, such as Tmall and JD as major e-commerce marketplaces, you have to take into consideration that these platforms are very much search-driven. So when consumers are actually going onto Douyin, they're just scrolling and their attention is grabbed by brands that they're not necessarily looking for. They don't necessarily have an intent when they go on short video platforms, which enables brands to really have the opportunity to connect with consumers directly and develop key learnings and data points of understanding of where target consumer demographics are on the platforms. So why is it that Chinese consumers trust KOLs? It's certainly a very localized element of Chinese media. The way that Xiaohongshu as a platform, as some of you may know, was developed initially as a platform where users could log in and get an understanding of what were popular brands and products that were selling in overseas markets that Chinese tourists or students had come across, and that's ultimately transformed into what the platform is today. KOLs, less commercial and more personal. So over the development of how KOLs have come to where they are and how they sit within the purchasing journey and that consumer experience for brands, they've become a lot more connected to everyday life with Chinese consumers. And I'll touch on a few more insights later in the presentation around how to manage content and to work collaboratively and effectively with a KOL or a KOC, but it's very normalized in China. And also, I think with the context of how Xiaohongshu has evolved over time, that they're often looked to as key touch points for product discovery. And that trust and authenticity is so important, particularly for Chinese consumers when purchasing products online, where they want to have a sense of validation and know that they're going to get a recommendation from a trusted source. KOLs and KOCs really come into play in this sense. Working with KOCs is also very powerful in that they can become quite involved in your community. So working as an ambassador, so to speak, for your brand and helping engage, answer questions, and create conversation and more dialogue around your brand on the platforms. So you'll see that your stereotypical categories when it comes to purchasing behavior that's driven by KOL endorsement. You've got your stereotypical categories such as cosmetics, clothing, shoes, bags, etc. Obviously more towards the female demographic in those areas. However, what we're certainly starting to see trends towards the impact of KOLs and KOCs on categories that would be more orientated towards male consumers. An example of that would be household and furniture. So there's certainly a trend around DIY and home renovation and innovation. An interesting case study, and gadgets, electronics. So whether that be headphones or fitness equipment, etc. An interesting case that we've had is quite a premium home toolkit from Europe that had done really well with working with KOLs and KOCs in the household and DIY segments, with a lot of content around how to effectively use the product in home in terms of DIY, which I would assume was certainly impacted potentially by the lockdowns during the last couple of years in mainland China. So why do Chinese consumers trust KOLs? What you interestingly see here is that, this is reinforcing the impact that KOLs have. It is very much a way of validating a purchase online for Chinese consumers. It's normalized, it's accepted, and it's been in the behavioral pattern of consumers in the market for a very long time. It's easy at times to perceive that KOL endorsements and KOC endorsements in China can come across as hard sell. Now, there's certainly a fine balance that needs to be made between the type of content that you're going to be collaborating with the KOL or KOC on the platforms, but it has to be taken with a grain of salt that it's a very normal and trusted way for brands to promote their products in the market. And I'll touch on a little bit more about why Little Red Book and Doyin are so important when it comes to that validation piece and that discovery. Little Red Book is a platform where consumers will intentionally go to discover new brands and products. Doyin is an opportunity for brands to be able to get in the face of a new consumer target segment. So these platforms can be leveraged in different ways when it comes to KOLs and KOCs, and they still have very much have merit in the market. So the advantages and disadvantages. So it is an easy method to reach a large number of potential consumers. At times, it can be difficult to measure what the ROI ultimately is on your investment. At Redfern, we run quite intensive test and learn programs on understanding when we initially engage with the brand, when it comes to a paid media campaign or any type of activation. We'll run a lot of data analytics to get an understanding of what's actually working for the brand when it comes to market. What are the core sales channels that the brand's selling through e-commerce? Are they on major marketplaces? Are they on social commerce? Are they selling on offline retail? We have to get an understanding of the core channels and what the core objectives are of the campaign. And then we work backwards based on the data that we get and the different types of KOLs and KOCs that we use. As I mentioned, it's a constant ongoing refinement, looking at the data and understanding, okay, we've chosen 4 different KOLs this month, or we've chosen 8 different KOCs this month. These KOCs have this type of following. They have this sort of area of focus when it comes to category and on interests and hobbies. These are the ones that are starting to resonate with our consumers. And these are the areas that we should be focusing on from the target consumer perspective. So it is a test and learn and trial and error game. But one of the core things when you're collaborating with KOLs and KOCs is to ensure that your content is authentic and organic. It needs to be memorable. It needs to be something that Chinese consumers or your target consumer segment is going to resonate with, and it's not too hard sell. In fact, a lot of brands and the platforms now, when it comes to brands, are becoming quite strict when it comes to the type of content that you're promoting from KOCs, particularly the Red Book, where you have to ensure that the content that you're deploying with KOLs and KOCs on these platforms isn't too hard sell, because ultimately they'll shut down the algorithm that will amplify your content. There are a number of different ways to look at collaborations with KOLs and KOCs. Offline events are certainly a powerful way to approach them, particularly for brands that are obviously selling in general trade or in market. So your food and beverage, spirits, alcohol oriented brands, offline pop-ups, events, music festivals, etc. And certainly visitations to offline flagship stores is a big one. We work with a number of brands in the beverage and fashion space in the mainland market, and having KOLs and KOCs actually visit the offline store, showcasing the store experience, doing on-site try-ons of clothing and trying product in the on-trade premises is a powerful way to create brand awareness and also make associations of the brand with similar areas of interest that consumers may have. So long-term collaborations are also key. So not throwing all of your dollars at one post from a KOL, looking at how can you collaborate with these KOLs longer term and have a more long-term view on how you're going to engage with them. There's some data points that I'll run through shortly that speak to how powerful and interested Chinese consumers are in specific and unique brand collaborations with KOLs and KOCs. So it's important to be conscious of wanting to foster that relationship. When you find a KOL or a KOC that fits well with your brand, it's creating engagement and you're seeing growth, consider how you can be fostering that relationship with that KOL or KOC to have a long-term vision of growth for the brand together. An interesting collaboration that we saw recently in Shanghai that was going mad. We saw a lot of foot traffic around Shanghai at a Manor coffee stand that was branded as Louis Vuitton. Some of you may have seen this on our LinkedIn post recently, but the Manor coffee shop was fully branded in blue with LV branding. You could see it from 2 miles away. And essentially they had done a collaboration between Manor Coffee, Plus One and Metal Hands. It was a campaign where consumers had to buy 2 books that covered one of the 3 topics: city guide, travel and fashion. Once they bought the 3 books, they could redeem an LV canvas bag from the coffee shop. So these are really, really innovative and interesting techniques that brands are taking in the market to try and capture that Gen Z and younger target consumer with exciting, fun, adventurous and colorful type initiatives to create buzz and awareness. So going back to my point around the importance of brand collaborations with KOLs and KOCs, you'll see that 89% of consumers say that they would be willing to purchase a product that is a collaboration between a brand and a KOL. And these initiatives that can be put forward that could be seasonal, they could be unique to one of the characteristics of the KOL or the KOC. I'd certainly recommend that when you do consider an initiative like this, that it's focused on a KOL that's a bit higher tier than obviously a KOC. It's a bit of an investment from the brands, obviously put forward an initiative like this. So you're wanting to go for one of your upper tier type KOLs or celebrity level KOLs to really get reach of an initiative such as this. So the rise of short video. So this is quite an interesting characteristic of Chinese media consumption. And I guess for lack of a better term, it comes back to consumer lack of attention and laziness, but it also allows for brands to be able to share quick absorbable information that can resonate quickly. It also allows brands to connect with a wide range of consumers at once without being restricted to being on a platform where the consumer has to intentionally search for something to come across your brand. So having that organic, immediate touch point is very powerful. And we're certainly seeing with the rise of Douyin as a platform, particularly for e-commerce and its growing market share in China across the e-commerce landscape, being so much more pivotal in that consumer purchase journey and allowing brands to reach so much wider customer base. Live streaming KOL. So these live streaming KOLs have obviously been a hot topic for a long time. It's important to consider that from a live streaming perspective, brands can often have the misperception that they're always going to be a profit or revenue generating exercise, which they certainly can be for some brands, but oftentimes, you know, there's quite a high associated costs with working with live stream KOLs. There are commissions in place. There are fees that need to be paid to their KOL. There are discounts that are expected. So molding and understanding what is the purpose and intention of why you're engaging with this live streaming KOL and what your ultimate goal is crucial. Often brands will use live streaming as a good mechanism to be able to drive traffic to the store and help ultimately build weight on your flagship store on one of the key marketplaces, because that really does support in that organic search engine optimization to help drive ultimately organic traffic to get to your store. So here we have a bit of a breakdown of the different platforms when it comes to KOL marketing in China. From a honest view of the core ones that reign supreme in the market at the moment would certainly be Little Red Book and Doyin. However, Weibo, as I mentioned, still has its merit in certain circumstances. It's very much more celebrity oriented when it comes to a paid media ROI. Brands will mainly use it for a celebrity endorsement initiative, though it does link to Tmall. The linkage that we see in terms of actual sales return based on investment on Weibo is quite limited. Juhu is certainly quite an interesting platform that is more tailored towards a academic and more professional Q&A type platform. So more technical and specialized categories. It's very simple and easy to manage, low cost. You could look at it similar to a more professional version of Quora. Bilibili, very powerful in targeting Gen Z consumers. It's the dominant proportion of platform users are Gen Z. So very popular among brands that are very much targeting a younger demographic. It does come with quite a high affiliated cost with operating in terms of paid media. So you'll see here the market share dominance of Douyin in terms of KOL investment compared to other platforms is significant, with Douyin, Little Red Book, and Weibo being the top three. Weibo obviously taking up quite a significant KOL investment market share split because of that brand endorsement perspective. Brands are using Weibo to pay a high investment for endorsement. So the amount of investment that's going into KOL marketing and Douyin can also be reflective of the rise of the market share of e-commerce that's going through Douyin now, which is looking at roughly 25% and continuously increasing. So with the minimizing of restrictions on setting up Douyin stores for a lot of brands in a number of categories, it's certainly a platform that is we're excited to see where it develops. And how much more market share it can start taking up in terms of the e-commerce space. So when you're looking at your KOL and KOC strategy for Little Red Book, you want to create hit posts. It's not about posting as many hashtags as possible. Volume is not what it's all about. Brands should really be looking at focusing on promotional tool spend, creating hit posts, which essentially means that you get a higher reach and more bang for your buck. And it helps better familiarize users with the brand and ultimately get more reach. We have some figures that I'll share with you shortly around the reciprocative engagement from a hit post to corresponding Tmall store diversions, which is quite interesting if you compare with a KOL or KOC post that isn't a hit post to one that is. high-ranking keywords. So as Little Red Book is very much a search-based platform, it's not like Doyin where you'll see content that is tailored automatically to you, that is also randomized to a certain extent. Little Red Book is, from a consumer journey perspective, a platform where consumers will intentionally look up certain topics, compared to Doyin, which is very much scroll through and look at tailored content. Because this is the way that that Little Red Book operates, it's really important for brands to look at how they can build on their keyword strategy, and look at building on keywords that are very relevant to the brand and can help amplify the search ranking of your brand in the platform. Just gonna jump through to the data points that highlight the power of Little Red Book hit posts. So you'll see here, there are two comparisons that are made here. You'll see on the right, a KOL post on Little Red Book that was a hit post. Reflective on the below graph is the Tmall conversion. So the click through to Tmall from that hit post, well, not click through, but the traffic that was generated through the Tmall from when that post went out and became a hit post, compared with another KOL post that was not a hit post. And you'll see that the traffic wasn't quite as significant to the marketplace. So very important that brands are looking at ensuring that they optimize and push as much as they can to get hit posts from when working with a KOL or a KOC. So the power of Little Red Book SEM, you'll see the fixed period in between when Little Red Book SEM was deployed for this brand, and then based on that period of SEM optimization, the Tmall sales value increased. So again, showing the importance of leveraging the different tools and mechanisms within Little Red Book that really help to drive traffic to the marketplace and overall e-commerce sales. From a Doyin approach, when it comes to KOL and KOC strategy, it is about creating volume and increasing reach through increased content. Now, that doesn't mean that a brand has to go and create a constant flow of localized video content for mainland China. That can also be a mixture of localized content. It can be edited and subbed content from the brand's existing video assets. What's important is there's a consistent flow of good content that's going through the brand's own media account, as opposed to looking at very, very large KOLs. The differentiation between costs of KOLs and KOCs in Doyin is very vast, but brands should certainly look to work with a large number of very small KOCs. That is essentially stimulating the chance that one of the posts will go viral. And again, with a similar ethos to working with a number of different KOCs on Little Red Book when you're new to the platform, it is sort of spreading your risk, so to speak. So much more strategic to be able to work with a number of smaller KOLs than larger. So you'll see here the top platforms for KOL marketing from a split in terms of gender profile. Obviously, the green is female and yellow is blue. So we're starting to see quite a significant increase in male platform consumption on Bilibili, particularly WeChat for older generation as well. So KOL tier by content focus and budget. So if you look at the different pricing brackets, and these do sort of change on a quarterly to 6 monthly basis in terms of cost and ultimately size and reach of the KOL or the KOC. But you'll see the pricing on Little Red Book. If you're looking at an influencer with less than 50,000, you can expect it to be around 5,000. And when you're looking at one of the larger KOLs on the platform, up to 50,000 RMB. Doyin is quite a different animal. You can see that the level of cost when it comes to the KOLs and KOCs from a reach and volume of followers perspective is much higher in terms of the reach and follower count of the influencers. But from a cost perspective is in line with Little Red Book, which reinforces the rhetoric of actually working with a higher volume of smaller KOLs and KOCs on Doyin than looking to work with large players. Deploying KOL and KOC spend. So this is essentially showing you an overview, whether you're operating on these own media platforms or not, where you should be allocating your budget. You'll see that from a Little Red Book perspective, you've got mid-tier KOLs as being a core segment to be focusing on. It has to be taken into account the level of development and your channel presence within the mainland China market of how you decide to deploy your spend, being very conscious of what online channels are you selling through, what offline channels are you selling through, certainly dictates the ratio of split and where you allocate your budgets to when marketing. An example would be for brands that are purely selling on e-commerce, we wouldn't recommend necessarily a high investment into WeChat paid advertising. On the contrary, for brands that we work with that have a strong offline and a retail presence in the China market, WeChat can be very powerful. Unfortunately, Tencent has made WeChat Moments advertising a lot more affordable in terms of minimum top-ups and data feeds. It's a lot more accessible now. So it's important to take into consideration the channels that you are selling through from an offline and online, which will help dictate what channels you're going to be focusing on one, but what ratios of spend split are you going to be allocating those budgets to. So favorite KOL categories. So the preferences of Gen Z. So Bilibili is certainly a major platform, and Doyin for connecting with Gen Z. Many of our brands that we're working with and have historically worked with in the China market as part of their entry and then development into established brands in China have a strong enthusiasm, and there's a big drive to really start connecting with the Gen Z consumer and innovate and create content and desire and resonation with the brand. So when we look at the different categories of KOLs that Gen Zs really connect with, cute pets, models, animation, beauty and skincare. So quite characteristical categories that you'll see on the likes of Doyin and Bilibili. The preferences of female users, so travel, literature, the work world, photography, and cute pets, which, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the pet category in China is one of the fastest growing across the major marketplaces. So quite a hot space to be in. I'm just conscious of time, so we'll continue through to the next slide. Let me just adjust my screen there. So framework to KOL marketing in China. So some tips on how you can better optimize the way that you're deploying your spend and how you're choosing your KOLs. It's important to do your research initially to get an understanding of, okay, who is my target audience? What KOLs or KOCs have the same group that my brand is going for, and focus on understanding whether they're the right fit, and then deploying test and learn to get an understanding of okay, we've worked with these four KOLs, we've got the most ROI from this type of KOL, and as I mentioned, optimizing from there. From there, it's important to work closely with the KOL to identify what are the key attributes of the brand or product that the followers of the KOL will resonate most with. So it's important not to be forceful with the KOL on these are the points that I want you to be pushing around my brand or product, simply because that may be something that doesn't resonate with their followers. So ensuring that you refine the content and it's something that the KOL, who knows best what their followers like and are engaged with, will accept to promoting. So optimizing sales channels, you have to have all of your ducks in a row when it comes to doing paid media in China before you go and spend money on KOLs and KOCs. Ensuring that the customer journey from product discovery through to actually purchasing the product on e-commerce or social commerce is as seamless as possible. The level of integration and customer journey online in China is a very, very short period. And to minimize that consumer journey and have as less hurdles as possible for consumers to have that discovery experience than actually purchase on e-commerce is crucial. You want to ensure that there are no hurdles or anything that will inhibit the click-through to purchase. Monitor and measure results. Now, this is a key factor for brands when they're particularly going through deploying spend for the first time, or they've just launched the brand in the China market. This should not be something that stops. Brands should always be monitoring and measuring their results on a monthly basis, regardless of how much spend is being invested. It's important to get an understanding of One, what channels are working for me? What type of KOLs and KOCs are giving me the best ROI? Are we seeing certain periods where we are getting more traction or more traffic being generated to our e-commerce channels? Are we realizing that there are creative assets or different types of key visuals that resonate more with certain types of KOLs and KOCs? It's an ongoing process of essentially building up a database of data that you can refer back to when it comes to navigating and building your strategy. So perhaps you have a period where you're promoting and wanting to build more brand awareness in the market. You may choose to work with certain types of paid media or KOLs in China. If you're looking to do more of a sales-driven type initiative leading up to a shopping festival or a certain emotional period, you may look to work with a certain profile of KOL that you found from your data helps optimize traffic to go to your Tmall store. So moving through to the next slide. So challenges of working with KOLs, negotiating price. So this is something that it's important that when you are working with a partner or a third-party agency, that they do their research and due diligence. Unfortunately, in China, there is a large issue when it comes to fake data and compliance, when it comes to media followership, engagement, likes, etc. The platforms are becoming better at monitoring this, but it still can be hit and miss. So the three core elements to be focusing on is negotiating the price and fake data, fake followers. So doing your due diligence and knowing, does this data look legitimate? Can you observe whether this KOL or KOC has actually worked with another brand of similar nature with a similar target audience? Can you make comparisons to the engagement that the brand, that other brands have had from promotions with this KOL, and make a feasible assessment on the validity of the data? And then obviously scandals, which can be very treacherous and damaging for brands, making sure that the KOL hasn't been involved in any scandals recently that could potentially compromise or backlash back to the brand, because that can spread fairly quickly. How do brands work with KOL? So developing the campaign, what format do you want the KOL to post in? Is it video? Is it photo? This is essentially a framework of how you develop the process from the engagement point with the KOL to actually deploying the content itself. What other brands are on the platform that have used the KOL before? Who are the competitors that are active on the platform when it comes to media spend? Understanding the behavior of your target audience with the KOL that you're using is crucial as well. What is their purchasing behavior, their preferences? What trends and subcultures and interests are areas that the brand should be tapping into? Hence, coming back to my point around accumulating data around all of the paid media that you're doing, and understanding from that data where you can channel and leverage your investment depending on your KPI for the campaign. So setting the key performance indicators. So when you're looking at an awareness focused campaign, obviously reach and views, these interests, you're looking at engagement, direct message inquiries, sales conversion, discount code, tracking links, no codes / tracking links. So how you develop your strategy with the KOLs is really dictated by what you're ultimately wanting to achieve. And strategies for brands will certainly change and fluctuate over time. As I mentioned, in certain periods of the year, brands will be focusing on hard sales when it's leading up to a key sales festival, such as 618 or 1111. And in certain periods, brands will look to focus on a lot more branded oriented campaigns. So understanding what your objective is for the specific period or the campaign is crucial to make sure that you're going down the right track when you're planning the way that you're approaching the campaign. It's very important to stress that if you are looking to focus on a sales-driven campaign, that ensuring that consumer journey of actually getting from that discovery through to being able to click through to the store and product listing is as seamless as possible, because you want to minimize the hindrance that a potential customer could have getting to your marketplace store. So setting the key performance indicators. So comparison to benchmarks, looking at, as I'd mentioned, if you're looking to engage with the KOL, what success can you see that this KOL has had with other brands? Don't be afraid to ask the KOL, can you show me some data or any case studies that you have had successful experiences with working with brands in the category. The A/B testing, again, this is another very important component and something to do continuously, is creating two versions of variables within the campaign that will allow you to get an understanding of the purpose and what variables within the campaign, whether it's assets, whether it's type of KOL, whether it's platform, to get an understanding of, okay, I can leverage this platform in this way and this platform that way to better optimize your strategy. And as I mentioned, this is something that brands should be doing as an ongoing process to ensure that they're constantly evolving as a brand and adapting and learning from the data that they're generating through the different channels and platforms, but also ensuring that they're moving with the times. Social media and paid media channels in China are always evolving. There are always new mechanisms and tools and opportunities that are popping up that brands should be able to leverage and capitalize on, and not run stagnant with being stuck in the mud, so to speak, with maintaining the same strategy nonstop. Brands need to keep innovating and looking at how they can leverage different tools as much as possible. Finding KOLs. So it can be an easy process, but the evaluation process can be harder than one would expect. Working with them directly and requesting information and data is key. There are a lot of MCNs out there that will help provide lists of different KOLs. It's important to ask questions and get an understanding of how legitimate these KOLs are. So again, selecting KOLs, evaluate the suitability. Do they really fit with your brand? Look at their content type. Does that resonate with your target consumer in China? Does it resonate with your brand DNA and your identity and goals? Again, the due diligence check of making sure that the content's authentic. The platforms are increasingly becoming sensitive towards hard sell content. They're wanting to work with KOLs that have a very good, organic, and genuine connection with their followers and have a lot of UGC and real engagement around their posts. Ask the KOL for their backend data, breakdown of the followers, so you can get a gauge of whether that followership is something that you can be leveraged for your brand and product. Other brand collaborations that they've done, and their willingness to actually collaborate and look at something that could be an opportunity for a long-term partnership as opposed to a one-off promotion. So reaching out to KOLs. So direct reaching out to a KOL is quite a straightforward process. Just manually reaching out to different accounts on the media platforms. It can be a challenging process, time consuming in terms of not knowing whether they're the ones that you want. You don't really have any prior knowledge to whether that KOL might be a fit. Maybe, from a naivety perspective, lack of knowledge of how valid the data is. So it's important to get a spread of different KOLs so you can establish a good understanding of what you can expect for varying brackets of price, depending on the cost of the KOL. Working through multi-channel networks, as I mentioned, or MCNs, the brand will usually be given a list and decide based on what they see from the list, what KOL is their preference or what KOL fits the most. They have a wide range of different influencers that have been vetted that are across a number of different categories. So agencies that are MCNs will generally help to negotiate pricing. They'll take a cut from in terms of management fees, but oftentimes the brand will not actually have a direct contact with the KOL. So that is a hindrance in terms of long-term collaboration and ultimate success. Briefing, contracting, and costs. So it's crucial to have an alignment in terms of process when working with KOLs. The fees, the payment terms, what are the roles and responsibilities of the KOL and then the brand? How is the KOL going to execute and deploy the campaign? What are the mechanisms that are going to be used within the campaign? Is there a discount code? Is there a key sales channel that you're trying to push the KOL's followers to? Which hashtags are you going to be leveraging? Scheduling, timeline, and communication channels. These are all elements that you need to be inclusive of in the contract because unless you have those black and white, it can cause issues in terms of mismanagement of expectations, content going out, a post or promotion going out, and it not hitting the mark of what your expectation was. So it's important to put in more depth and detail about what your expectations are and what your ROI is with the potential campaign, and work and collaborate with the KOL on how they can give guidance and be more suggestive about how to optimize based on how they know their followers as well. Ultimately, as I mentioned, the KOLs know their followers the best. Create a campaign brief and ensure KOLs are cleared to the requirements. So this goes back to just having that framework in place for how the KOL needs to develop the content. Right? For example, if it's developing a recipe, be suggestive in terms of what type of ingredients or recipes that your product can be used within. Provide a guideline and a framework for the KOL to work with. So tips for content creation. Not to enforce many stylistic restrictions. Sponsored content should always feel natural. So that authenticity is a very important part when it comes to the marketing element. Driving the KOL to give their own autonomous freedom of creativity, letting them be suggestive when it comes to making sure that the way that they promote your branded product fits the style and the content type. One thing that is certainly important is making sure that you vet the content before anything goes out. So that's a very, very common practice when it comes to ensuring that, okay, KOL has received brief, they've developed the content, the timelines in place for scheduling of the promotion, making sure that before anything goes out on the media channels that they confirm it with you prior to posting. So this is certainly one of the most important components of KOL marketing in China is the after posting analysis. So brands want to be tracking what they're seeing in terms of ROI in the campaign itself. Backend systems across the platforms can help track this in terms of views, reach, likes, shares, comments, and establishing what the KPI metrics are that you're going to be measuring is important before you actually launch the campaign. And going back to my point of being able to generate historical data that is reflective of what data you've generated over time and how you can match that with your performance and success as you develop your presence in social media in China is particularly important. It will help you define the different KOLs that you want to be working with. You'll know what type of KOLs can serve specific reasons and KPIs and which KOLs and KOCs to avoid. So I'm going to move a bit faster because I'm running out of time here, but just generally summarizing some of the high-level tips from working with KOLs. So clear communication, making sure that briefing is clear, scheduling is clear, how they're going to develop the content, making sure that you are able to sign off on anything, having a plan, so understanding what is the plan of how you'll be working with the KOLs, especially if you're doing an omni-channel or a campaign that involves multiple different KOLs, defining what the goals are for the campaign, using the right platforms. If you're going to be doing a sales-driven campaign, focusing on a paid media channel that's going to help support sales. If it's a brand awareness campaign and you're looking for a lot of reach and exposure, you'll be looking at another platform. So these are important elements where the Chinese social media and paid media ecosystem varies very significantly to outside of China. Platforms operate and are leveraged in very different ways. So brands need to take that in consideration when they're choosing the platforms and the purpose of why they're choosing them. Don't be too commercial. Know your regulations and restrictions. This is, again, quite a big one when it comes to platform compliance and mentioning of key statements. So making sure that you're abiding by the rules, because the platforms can be quite strict when it comes to compliance. And if you don't abide by the rules, they can cause issues, particularly when it comes to minimizing traffic and exposure for you as a brand, and also limiting your brand to opportunities on the platform to promote through different in-app channels, or just through the overall organic reach of your content. Ensuring that you remain compliant will inhibit any of those types of risks. Virtual key opinion leaders is quite an interesting novel concept that's taken to stardom over the last couple of years. A lot of young fashion brands have started working with virtual influencers. It's been increasingly common. It's interesting that from the perspective of human influencers, they are certainly larger than virtual influencers in the current state of the market, but they're certainly getting a lot trendier. And this has been largely driven by, again, a Gen Z population. You'll see Doyin as being a key platform for virtual key opinion leaders in their rise to stardom. Little Monk, quite a prolific virtual key opinion leader on Doyin, has 45 million followers. So they're certainly creating a presence and creating a lot of noise. But there's quite a bit of variation between how these virtual KOLs are characterized and the type of consumers who follow them. There's obviously quite a cute, cartoony aesthetic to some of the different virtual key opinion leaders that would target a Gen Z or younger consumer. And then you have a bit more of the sophisticated and more AI-driven virtual influencers that do cater towards more of an older audience. So finishing off just with some strategic suggestions around your KOL and KOC strategy for China. You want your investment to more or less come to one-to-one. And in terms of KOL and paid media promotional tool investment, one-to-one. So when I refer to paid media promotional tool investment, that is a promotional tool mechanism within the social media platform that is paid essentially to the platform to advertise on different banners or newsfeed ads within the channel. The landscape is becoming a lot more competitive when it comes to using KOLs. So from a strategic perspective, it is, as I mentioned, good to spread your eggs in different baskets. KOLs are becoming a lot more demanding, so being open and willing to collaborate and look at different initiatives that can be more open for supporting their KOL and collaborating on something more long-term and a bit more of a strategic partnership. But do expect that there's going to be a demand for payment. The days of free gifting are long gone, but it does still happen. To generate virality on Doyin and Little Red Book, paid media collaborations with smaller KOLs, then putting spend into the promotional tool to boost the reach of the KOL posts. This is quite a cost-effective approach to help boost exposure above and beyond the existing follower pool of the KOL. So just going back and recapping before we finish with some key takeaways of what we're seeing for 2023. Audit of KOLs is crucial. Don't go pouring your money down the drain until you've done your due diligence. You may think that the KOL looks and fits perfect for what you're trying to position and push in the China market, but that simply may not be the case. Do your research, do your homework, and find out the nitty and gritty about the KOL and compare. Maintain a good working relationship with KOLs. If they become, the KOLs ultimately have the potential to become very pivotal to your strategy for China. So ensuring that you nurture that relationship, if you're seeing traction and potential opportunities for growth is crucial. KOL campaigns can help build anticipation. So if there is a relationship with a KOL that you've built over time, or you've just engaged with a new KOL, they can be very powerful in NPD launches for market or during key sales periods as well. On Xiaohongshu and Douyin, leading up to key sales periods in market is a very intensive period of where we'll do preheat promotion for brands that are looking to capitalize during the e-commerce sales periods. KOL follower numbers and engagement rates can change quickly, and this is why it's important also to do the due diligence on the data before you engage with a KOL or a KOC, because you can see from many different backend platforms and third-party data tools exactly what has happened with the data, and you can see inconsistencies and obscurities in the data that could be reflective of buying fake engagement. So that's something to be very conscious of. So the final slide is summarizing sort of what we're seeing in terms of key changes and takeaways for this year. KOLs investment isn't slowing down. There's increased costs and inflation of working with KOLs, but the investment is continuing. It's a matter of brands being more intensive in data analytical on how the KOL's performance is helping their brand. and really focusing and narrowing down the data and pulling out the insights of understanding what's really helping build the brand and market. KOCs, just as important for word of mouth marketing, particularly because of their loyalty with their followers. Placing promotional spend and bid on KOL KOC posts in terms of Little Red Book SEM is a really, it's a very cost-effective and strategic way for brands to get a good reach with KOC that has a strong follower base, but not have to invest as much as potentially working with one KOL. For KOL marketing, Doyin and Xiaohongshu are the kings at the moment, particularly Doyin. So don't isolate them from your marketing strategy. Virtual KOLs are an interesting space. We're watching them very closely in terms of how brands are leveraging them. So certainly, depending on the category that you operate in, something to be mindful of and I'm open to if you can see a fit with some of the different types of virtual KOLs that are popping up in the market. So I'm going to finish my session there. We're just coming up to 9 p.m. China time. Thank you everybody for listening to the session. No matter where you are globally at the moment, I hope the session was useful and insightful. I can see that I think, Sandra, quite a few questions have come through on the chat.
Yeah, I think we're, I don't want to go too over time. So I'm just going to ask 2 questions and then the rest of the questions we'll get to by email afterwards.
Sure.
So jumping right into the first one. So are there any platforms where KOLs are registered and these platforms kind of act as the facilitator between the brand and the KOL? So one example that this person gave was where the brand sends samples and then the KOL creates content and posts.
Yes, Little Red Book has a very similar concept that brands can capitalize on. And it also does put a layer of verification on ensuring that the KOL and the KOC is genuine as well. So yes, that does exist. We do work with a number of brands that use the platform, but we'll use a mixture of working directly and organically with the KOLs and KOCs as well.
And then the last question for the day before we jump off is, given that you're not able to link to Tmall directly from Little Red Book, how do you track the success of KOL marketing campaigns on Little Red Book? I think you covered it a little bit, but maybe you could go into more detail.
Yeah, so, and I think from Redfin Digital's perspective, it's very useful in us that being a TP and then also a media agency by DNA, we have that ability to track the data progression of we've run a campaign on Little Red Book or we've run a specific KOL media post. We can match data based on the time period, right? There's no genuine data that is reflective of what traffic has come from it, but you can make a fair judgment based on what you can see in terms of traffic flow once you've actually put a post out. So it's based off what you can see from the Tmall influx of followership based on when you essentially do the promotion.
All right, so I think that's all the ones that we have time for. So Ashwin's details are on the screen right now. Feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. And then also feel free to reach out if you'd like more information about KOL marketing specific to our category. And I think I showed this briefly. So we're having another webinar on 9th of August, 2023 on Wednesday. It'll be on building loyalty through community in China. So for example, WeChat communities or other types of communities, and a lot of brands have done really well in building up that community and that brand loyalty, encouraging repeat purchases. So we'll be diving right into that in about 4 weeks, I think that is. And thank you so much for joining, everybody. We'll definitely be sure to get to the questions that we did not answer in person through email. And then, yeah, I think that's it from my end. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. And thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.